Welcome everyone to SaaScast, the podcast that talks you through the steps you need to future-proof your product, whether that's building the ultimate marketing team or taking your products global. Our guests will help you grow, scale up, and work smarter.
Hi, Brad. Thanks so much for joining us on SaaScast today.
It's a pleasure, Anthony. Happy to be
Great,
here.
great. I'm sure before we get started, our listeners would just love to hear a little bit more about you and about kind of your journey to your current positions and what kind of led you along the path that you've walked.
No. Happy to jump in there. So, Brad Hoeweler, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pay Theory, inclusive embedded payments and finance. And my journey to Pay Theory really started back in the late 90s, the early days of the internet. Co-founded a company called Skipjack, which was one of the first internet payment gateways, and was lucky enough to lead a fantastic team. And we built a great product. Went through a couple of internet 1.0, 2.0, a bunch of busts and booms, and ended up exiting Skipjack, sold it to what is now WorldPay, and worked there along with a great group of people. And it was really a pivotal moment, in this embedded payments timeline. A group of people that I worked with there invented what is now called payment facilitation, which for all of your SaaS listeners is really the payments model that is really the engine behind vertical SaaS plus payments, right? If you're seeing anybody that's doing it well, it is the engine, it's the model that you're seeing Stripe, Square, PayPal, any of the really successful, companies that have monetized payments like Toast, Breadcrumb. That's really the model. And so I've been, really in the mix and right at the crux of a lot of those changes over the years. After I left WorldPay, had a consulting practice, and we helped large SaaS companies become payment facilitators. It was with that original crew that from WorldPay that had invented the model, and it was in that journey where I was really looking to do something to take advantage of what's been going on there, but also I wanted to do something with impact, and that led to Pay Theory. I met my co-founder who was coming out of the edtech space. He had a vertical SaaS platform there. And as we started to look at the challenges that what we call must-pay verticals were facing, and so, in Pay Theory speak, must-pay verticals are healthcare, education, childcare, senior care, government, rent, utilities, insurance. Those things that we as consumers and families need to make sure that we have access to and we're availing ourselves of. And we saw that there were a lot of underserved aspects of the needs of those verticals, whether it's complex hierarchies and structures, complex fund flow needs. And the one that really spoke to our hearts was also this concept of inclusive payments, meaning that, in our original vertical of education, 30% of kids in U.S. public schools live in and underbanked households. So if all of our user experiences are ending up on a SaaS platform, they're ending up online or on a mobile device, how do you ensure access for cash payers? So, that was a vital piece of what we've built, and we've been very much on this path to create really, really capable, industry-focused, inclusive payments infrastructure. And that's also led us to some of the really cool things we're now expanding beyond embedded payments and into embedded finance. So it all kind of goes hand in hand, and we think that there's an incredible opportunity to really unify what has traditionally been two sides of the, if you want to think about it as like the funds flow and movement of money, acceptance of money, payment of money out, really bringing those together into a platform that's designed for specific verticals.
Yeah, it's really, really fascinating. I love the idea of it. Did you? So how exactly does this work then? If it's a platform that's going to support cash payers, How, I mean, it sounds like a great idea, but I'm just wondering, like in practice, how does it actually
Yeah.
function?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in your typical checkout process, you're used to seeing the ability to pay with card, ACH or EFT. We call it ACH in the States, right? EFT
Mm.
elsewhere, right? Where you're entering some bank account credentials for this payment. So, in addition to those offerings and other payment methods, we have also added what we call remote cash acceptance to that. So, what that looks like is, obviously this has been embedded into a SaaS platform, but for the consumer, what they're going to see is that cash option. They're going to, if they select cash, what we do is we create a barcode for that transaction. And there's a lot of control that can be had over, how that barcode is set up. But the crux of it is that you're going to create a barcode. That barcode can then be taken to one of 80,000 retail locations around the U.S. Retailers like CVS, Walgreens, Family Dollar,
Mm.
Dollar General, Kroger, Walmart, 7-Eleven, and taken to either the point of sale, as if you were just buying, aspirin and toilet paper. And my dog is super excited about this as well. Uh, but you're going to take that to the point of sale. They're going to ring it up, and it's going to scan just as if it were some other item that you were buying, and the consumer's going to pay the cash there at the retailer, and then we're going to, in the background, move the funds back to the healthcare provider, to the school, to the government, whatever entity is getting paid.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that sounds really, really cool. So let's go back then to embedded finance, and sort of the root of it, because I think it'd be really interesting just to talk about like kind of someone like you who's got that perspective, who's been around to see the kind of birth of it. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Like, what did it arise from, and why is it something that, people on this who listen to this podcast would be sort of would need to hear about? What is it about it in particular?
Yeah. So the really cool thing about, well, I guess the interesting, really cool thing about what we're all doing here is that, these transactions are happening already, right?
Mm,
But they tend to be disjointed. There tend to be risk
mm,
regulatory concerns. They're not, as in the internet, we always love to say things like frictionless and future proof, and so you're dealing with a lot of legacy systems, right? That have, in the more developed economies, you're dealing with a lot of legacy systems that do volume, do certain things really well, but times have changed, right? There's a
mm,
lot of tech debt with those systems. So being able to access those systems, they tend to be, even if you go to one of the very large processors, they will have every feature functionality in the world within their four walls, but they exist on, dozens of different platforms. So if you come in as a SaaS platform, an ISV, a payment facilitator, whichever platform they put you on will have certain things that are very important to you, but it will be lacking other things, right? And so that's kind of what we've done is stitch all those things together so that we are able to bring them to the forefront and bring them into one user experience, one set of APIs, SDKs. And what that allows you to do is, if I could take this up a little bit, one of the I think things that is unique about the way that we approach this market and fintech and all the things that we're doing is we really think about user experiences, right? And so
mm,
your SaaS platforms are creating user experiences. They're creating user experiences for, we if we talk about healthcare, they're creating user experiences for the healthcare provider. But they're also, by extension, creating user experiences for consumers, and they have to be able to take care of both of those parties, right? Both of those stakeholder groups. Because if you only solve, look, here's a perfect example. Going cashless would be amazing for a healthcare provider,
yeah.
right? It would solve a lot of problems. Cash is not easy to deal with. The problem is that completely ignores the fact that you have people that either want or need to use cash. So
Mm,
you've got to solve the problem for both entities. And so we really think, in all of our design, and we really want the technology to serve that user experience. So a perfect example of why a SaaS platform should be worried about this is that the more, obviously your platform becomes more valuable, the more functionality you're able, the more that we always used to say like the revenue, exists at the user experience level. So if the more user experience you control, the more value you add to your platform, the stickier, that you can command a premium, you're going to keep people around longer, right? So what that then entails is that if you get into the finance world of this, it typically looks like, hey, I'm accepting a payment. What else do I need to do? Well, my consumers might need to, you know, they have cards, they have bank accounts, maybe they need cash, but perhaps this is a larger purchase and they need to finance it, right? So now we're going to do some financing at the point of sale. Maybe my merchants need financing, right? They need to get their funds faster. Maybe I'm more of a marketplace and I need to push funds out to I've got basically a double-sided marketplace here. So bringing all those capabilities together into one platform, right, and allowing you to do that just makes your life easier instead of cobbling together 6, 7 different partners on the back end. Working with somebody who can bring that all at once, and then very specifically, within our must pay verticals, doing it with somebody who also is thinking about, hey, how can I add value, right? How can I help you collect the information along with those transactions that you need for risk, regulatory, compliance reasons? How can I make sure that in healthcare, you're adding cash payments, which is access to healthcare is one of the key initiatives that many of our healthcare partners and platforms are really seeking, whether it's a strategic determinants of health aspect, whether there are a number of different approaches that, but also getting paid, right? In the healthcare space specifically, right? The patient responsibility side of that, you're seeing late payments or not, a lot of payments that don't get collected. So anything you can do to help that revenue cycle, whether it's through payment plans, getting paid, and that all comes together, because at the end of the day, you're just thinking about moving money, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but then you need somebody who also understands what's going on behind the scenes, right? Because you got to bridge that gap where if you're not a payments expert, if you're not an embedded finance expert, managing your compliance, managing your risk and underwriting, managing chargebacks and disputes, understanding what the banking system wants to see there and applying it to your vertical. That's where it's really important to work with experts in those spaces.
So I think this is a really, really vital topic, especially I love the kind of, you've come up with a solution for in particular, the healthcare vertical in a way. I want to know a little bit more about like kind of what was the kind of thinking behind that in particular? Did you kind of notice that there was a particular barrier to certain people in the States, certain healthcare, certain people who needed healthcare, and what did that look like? What was the barrier to kind of these embedded finance solutions or payments?
Yeah, yeah. So, as I mentioned, like our journey in these spaces really started with this idea of inclusivity and acceptance
Yeah.
of all forms of payment, right? And so then as we, get into each of our verticals, they each have different needs. And when it comes to healthcare, we're very much focused in healthcare on the patient responsibility side of those payments. And it's very clear, right? If you look at the problems in healthcare, it's a massive, in the States where you don't have universal coverage, it is a massive portion of every consumer's wallet spend. It is complex. There's a lot of regulation. There are a lot of nuance, right? So we are the only PayFac that we're aware of that's approved to write online pharmacy and telehealth, for example. So for those industries, it is very important to have a really robust risk underwriting and review policy, because we have to make sure that our online pharmacy clients are not selling items that they shouldn't be selling, right? That they're not making claims that they shouldn't be making. There are a lot of different laws in various states around how you can provide those types of services. So it requires a pretty complex understanding of the the regulatory side on the healthcare side, but then matching that up with the risk regulatory and compliance setup on the payment side or on the embedded finance side. Sometimes in the payments world, things that we in the general population don't think of as being high risk are actually high risk in
Hmm.
payments, right?
Right.
It could be, the business risk. It could be reputational risk. It could be the exposure to chargebacks. So that brings a complexity there. So when we started looking at healthcare, it was like, all right, again, looking at all the players here, like the service providers need to get paid, right?
Mm.
They're there to provide a vital service. How do we ensure that they have the ability to do that? But in order to do that, you have to, have really flexible payment options for the
Mm.
consumer, right? So you have to think about the consumer as well. And where does that user experience live where all this is happening? And that's with the listeners here. That's with the SaaS platforms, right? Who are creating that. So have the platform, have the solutions that allow all of those stakeholder groups to monetize, to stay compliant, to accelerate, receipt of money, get paid quicker, get paid, just frankly, just get paid at times, and do it in a way that's digestible for the
Mm.
consumers, right? So it's kind of where we led. Hopefully, I answered that question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like the angle of the user experience as well. I think that's something that people don't think about enough sometimes. Is kind of like I think sometimes just these platforms can be just overwhelming for the consumer, can't they, for the user? And I like how you highlighted the importance of it being digestible and something that people can easily understand how to use. I mean, it's I suppose it's tricky enough with platforms where it's kind of, it's something that's maybe, a nice to have. But something like this that's absolutely essential, obviously, and emotions are kind of running high with something like healthcare, obviously, it needs to be presented in a form that's kind of easy to understand, easy to take in. That makes total sense.
Absolutely, absolutely, right. And so,
Yeah.
what we want to do is I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've seen my own healthcare bills at times and trying to understand what's covered, what's not covered, what I'm responsible for.
Mm.
Uh, you start to get notices if you don't pay them in time, and that's not good for anyone in the system. It's not good for the consumer. It leads to a lot of angst and anxiety, and it's not good for the provider who needs to get paid and
Mm.
um, who's relying on those funds coming in to provide services to everyone who's coming through the door. So what I think we really focus on are doing things like contextual help throughout all of our platforms. We mentioned the creating a barcode for the cash payments. One of the unique little things we do on that is, there's a location finder. There are instructions for the consumer on how to use it. We even have one of the things that we had through our testing was that we would go into a retailer, and there's a lot of turnover, right, within
Mm.
the people who are working within the retailers. And so, somebody would come up with the barcode, and the retailer, the person working the cash register would be like, I'm not sure what I do with that. So we actually have instructions on, the presentation there for the person who's working at the retail store. Um,
Mm.
it could be, things like that, just for the healthcare provider too. I mean, they're experts in healthcare, right? Right, hopefully, uh, not necessarily, they're not fintech experts.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
doing a lot for both of those parties as well, just to throughout the entire experience, um, make it easy, more information, right? Adding the capability to send a lot of extra information with those transactions, so that you can communicate, so that when the transactions happen, the ability to reach out and make sure that everyone is on the same page as to where things are in flight, managing that whole system. it's very, very important. It's not easy. It's complex, but if you get it right, it drastically improves everyone's experience.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit more then, because I'm interested in how, I'm always interested in talking to people who sort of have seen technology evolve over time. And I'm really interested with you in particular, like, well, what's the thing that's happening right now? Obviously, you've seen a lot of big developments, but the thing that everyone's talking about is AI,
Hmm.
isn't it? In
Yeah.
particular, how do you see, I mean, maybe you implement it already, but how have you either implemented it or how have you seen it impacting the work that you do?
Yeah. So AI in our space, I think the first areas that you'll see it really come into play are in helping to identify and manage fraud in the
Mm-hmm.
system. Whether that's the when we're introducing individuals or businesses into the financial system, we are responsible for KYB, KYC, AML, FinCEN. We're running a lot of checks to make sure that these are, um, you know, uh, players who should be taking part in the system, right? That they're not bad actors. We're looking at reputational risk. We're looking at all these things. So right then and there, right? Like AI has the ability to look at these large data sets and pattern match and do all these other things to help identify potential fraud. You're starting to see that, right? The other aspect is at the transaction level, right? Identifying transactions that are potentially fraudulent. It's interesting in our space, a lot of the data sets in payments, for instance, and in finance, are live with large financial institutions, live with large processors, right? They live with card brands. So that's the level that you're going to see. That's the first level that you're going to see the exposure, right? And then because to really take advantage of, I think, the power within our space, you've got to have access to those large data sets, and that's where they live right now. They're not public; they're proprietary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think you'll see that more and more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, we look at and utilize some AI here and there within our own just operational uh, infrastructure as well to make us more efficient and help us create better products faster.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if you're looking at it from the fintech space, that's where you're going to start to see AI first and foremost being put to use.
Yeah. Are there any kind of ethical concerns, especially when dealing with something like healthcare? Is there anything that you have to kind of watch out for there with AI in particular?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you've got the possibility of false positive, false negatives, I think
Yeah.
we've seen AI that becomes discriminatory pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The stories of various large enterprises having to sort of shelve their AI assistants because they've been taught bad things, right? Is legend. So, we're not that is not really where we're playing specifically. Potentially your SaaS listeners, they're looking at those kind of things. Um, but I do think, for instance, where we will really watch and make sure that we're staying on top of things would be as we do things like loan origination services. If AI is part of that, really making sure that it's not discriminatory. That approval of transactions. We're not the ones approving the transactions, so you would hope that AI does not start to identify that sorts of fraud based on bad data, or data that's not being watched, and
Mm.
that feedback loop has got to be something that there's some oversight on. I believe, at least. I don't think you want to get me started on AI.
We know what we get into it in every episode of SaaScast
Really?
actually. Like yeah we do. Yeah. It
I'm
just
worried.
seems to be the thing that just everyone's talking about at the moment.
Everybody's
So
excited about it, and for good reason, right? It's a very powerful
yeah,
tool.
yeah.
I worry about the long-term ramifications to human purpose and
Yeah.
usefulness.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, definitely like creativity and um I
Well, I mean,
saw
that was always what everybody said. Oh well, it'll never be creative, right?
yeah.
And I mean, like, hey, look, AGI. Will AGI ever get there? I'm sure there are people who believe it will, and maybe one day. But so even if we say, hey, there's not AI that will ever do the amazing things that Anthony does on a daily basis,
Mhm.
all those things in one, in one entity in one existence, right? There are a lot of AI, plus robotics that do the individual things that you do better than you can do those individual things, right? They
Yes, yeah.
spread out. And so then my team gets tired of hearing me rant about this. And I don't know that your listeners want to hear me rant about this either.
Oh, we definitely do. We
Oh
definitely
yeah, so
do.
we're in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I think the number one job title in the state of Ohio is truck driver, right? So if you have autonomous driving trucks, there obviously be a transition where you're still going to have a driver, but I mean,
Mm,
right then and there, like what's the utility of a human being, right? When we start
yeah.
things, and everybody says, oh, well, you're just, same thing was said about the invention of the car and all these other things. And I mean, that's true to a point, but I really worry it's the speed with which things change that is the problem. Not that they change, right? It's
Mm,
this if systems can adapt and they have time to adapt, that's that we figure those things out. But
mm.
if it changes that fast and you can't repurpose it, workforces and everything else, I mean, I think we're having to think pretty long and hard about things like universal income and like,
Yeah.
what the heck am I going to do with my free time? I guess I'll go play more golf.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about me. I'm old. Like, it's like my grandkids, right? My grandkids are the ones that are going to have problems.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I totally understand. I think, about my own life, just to try and bring this into like something SaaS related, is kind of like one of the frustrations that I have with AI as a consumer is with customer support. And often I look at, kind of think pieces and blog posts for my work. It's kind of about like, oh, isn't it great, what we can do with this chatbot technology and all this kind of stuff. And I just find it infinitely frustrating, if I'm really honest. Like I want to, when I have a problem with like, a piece of software that I'm using or whatever it is, it's not, I know that a lot of the AI can answer questions, but I just want to talk to a human being who,
Right.
when I express my problem that I'm having, I can see that they're actually taking it in, and they
Yep.
can look at my circumstances and really kind of empathize, I suppose. I think it's easy to take a kind of totally utilitarian look at these kind of things, or viewpoint, but I think, there's just value in human interaction, I think. And I think people feel safer when they know that they're dealing with a person a lot of the time. It's just
Yeah, I mean, you're getting into like sort of the persona of an entity or a culture.
yeah.
Uh, look. I mean, I think you can tell from my opinions on AI. We are we're very much focused on user experiences, and that means that it will always be people when you're dealing with pay theory, or at least as long as I'm running it, you'll be dealing with people, right? And I think that's really important because one of the things that I see throughout our industry, the SaaS industry, the other fintechs, you've got a lot of incredibly smart people building really cool things, but at times, these are, they're the technology, the platforms are being built by people who haven't ever been on the other end of a phone with Anthony when he's mad. And Anthony when he can't find his money, right? Like what happened? Why do my sales not match my bank deposit, right? and this happened, and and so I see things. It's just like the nomenclature that's used within a system where you can't figure out what the heck has happened, right? It's like all these little things, and the our team, like we've got a lot of really smart young people that, and great group that work with us, but we've also got a lot of people that've got battle scars, right? I mean, like I've been yelled at in my day, you know what I mean? Like I've we solved a lot of problems, back in the beginning when things didn't work that way, right? And it's youth, and I think it's like a benevolent naivete where you don't know that it can't be done a certain way, so you just charge forward and do it. That works to an extent, right? It works in certain industries. It can work in SaaS, finance, and that's why you're seeing a lot of people getting into problems right now, right? People that just charge, we're going to do some crazy things, and they don't necessarily understand like what the bank that's sitting behind this, what their motivation is, and what their restrictions are, and the oversight that they have to make sure that they're following. And so I think having a healthy mix of sort of a youthful attitude, wanting to get in there and just solve problems, and damn the torpedo, straight full steam ahead kind of moment, versus like having those battle scars, understanding the motivations of large enterprise institutions. That's one of the other things that we do, right? I mean, like we very much work on the we have a lot of SMB merchants, but we also work very much up in that enterprise level, and that's a different animal, right? I mean, the complexity, whether it's security, risk, regulatory, all those things come into play. So this becomes not just technology, it becomes user experience, it becomes risk, regulatory, compliance, and bringing all those things together is really important.
I think you've really highlighted something in particular. Like I was going to ask you next about, the unique challenges that people have when they're setting up like an embedded finance kind of solution, but I think you've already put your finger on it in a way, which is like, there are, I mean, I mentioned the more kind of human side of it when I said that, you're going to get a lot of people trying to contact you in a very emotional state because we're talking payments here and money, right? But then it's a kind of high stress environment potentially that you're coming into with your big brain and your big ideas about what the platform is what it's gonna look like, right? But then also there's a lot of risk, isn't there? That is in particular that things with these systems where things can go wrong for whatever reason. I know that recently that there was a platform, the SaaS platform Snowflake, where they had a data breach and all everyone's logins got hacked or whatever. I dread to think with something like embedded finance, if there's a security breach or something like that and people's details are hacked into, I can't imagine the shit show that ensues. I didn't want to swear, but I couldn't think of a better word. Because that ensues from that kind of thing. And I imagine someone who's been around for a while, you've seen it, right? You've seen the crisis and what happens, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's why uh, the process of becoming a PayFac, right? Like there might be SaaS platforms out there that are listening that are thinking about doing that, and the control of user experiences, the financial reward of doing something like that. It can be very large, right? And so there can be a lot of reasons. But to your point, you have to understand the other aspect of that, right? If you want to become a PayFac, you also have to realize that you are now becoming a payments company. You're not just vertical SaaS within healthcare. You're not just pick a vertical that one of your SaaS platforms might be doing, right? If you're going that far, you are becoming a payments company. You have to operate like one. You have to understand payments, and that's why you see where we do things. For instance, like we do PayFac on us, meaning we're the PayFac, and we extend a lot of that, or we allow somebody else to come and do it. But when you're doing it, you have to do a lot of things, and that could be PCI obviously is in the States is the go-to security feature, but it could be ISO ISO, compliance things. We do things again, specifically in healthcare with some of our risk and underwriting, our reputation risk, and all of these things play together, but things can go wrong. So I will tell you right now, I've worked with every major processor for many, many years. I've never worked with anyone who hasn't had problems at some point in time or another.
Yeah.
So you have to remain diligent. You have to stay on top of things. You've got to have really robust, uh, you know, infrastructure, compliance frameworks, and sort of your point, the more security side of these things, that exists in alongside it and intertwined with all these other channels I'm talking about. Uh, it's a constant process. It's not I do it and I'm done and then I come back to it next time I've got my PCI audit. It has to be something that you're doing
Mm.
over and over again. And the deeper you get into it, the closer to the metal that you get on the payment side, the more robust the requirements are, and the more you're doing on a constant basis. So it's not fun. I've when those things happen, it's not fun, and certain mechanisms exist in the world where I think the credit card space specifically has gotten really good at it. I mean, there's a lot of breaches, but there are a lot of safeguards within the credit card side of this equation that protect the consumer, right? You're going to get a card. You're not going to get charges on your card for the most part when those things happen. Visa, MasterCard are very good. Amex, all the card brands Discover are very good at getting out in front of those things and taking care of those things. It's not, the consumer doesn't see the pain, for the most part. I mean, I'm not saying they're completely immune from it. Obviously, it's not fun when these things happen. But on that side of things, the industry has done a really good job of handling this. When you start to get into banks and you start to get into other data elements that are there are less
Mm.
protections in the system, that becomes a problem, right? It's interesting. Not that I want to take this conversation into like a crypto world or a DeFi world, but I think that's one of the missing pieces, from widespread transactional usage of crypto DeFi. I mean, obviously, we need some stable coins and something that doesn't act like just a store of value, a speculative store of value. But until these systems, and I mean, it's kind of antithetical to the reason that crypto was created, right? Like it was like, hey, we hate the man. We're gonna, and we want everything distributed so nobody can figure out what we're doing. But the missing piece for widespread usage is, in my opinion at least, is that there aren't consumer protections, right? There aren't all these ways to air trap. So I think I've hit part of your question, but I would say the other thing is that it's really important when you're implementing these things that you think about a lot of just like there are a lot of very simple things. For instance, just like error trapping, like making sure people don't submit transactions twice, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like we can see that we can do velocity monitoring and a number of other checks and check those things, but sometimes they're real transactions, right? Or sometimes you were paying twice and it looked like the exact same transaction and it really wasn't, right? We've stopped transactions that were actually real, and then you have to go back, we were erring to the side of caution, and then you got to go back and, you work with your partners, you get it sorted out and everybody's happy. But, there's got to be a lot of, a lot of security within the system. You see it at, that security level that you're talking about. You see it with one of the things that we work really hard with our partners on the back end is, for instance, we see processors at times just decide, hey, we're not working with this vertical anymore, right?
Mm.
You've seen that. I won't mention players, but especially during things like COVID. So if you were travel, if you were anything where you're paying up front and things were taking time. So we've seen furniture,
Mm.
verticals. It was some of these things. Like there are times when if you're in a certain vertical, you're in trouble. you gotta potentially work with all, we're multi-processor on the back end, and some of our enterprise clients really like that because we can help, spread their risk out over multiple processors and provide that business continuity layer. And it could be things, in the healthcare space when laws change, right?
Mm.
Um, it could be things like Supreme Court overturning Roe, right? Like, what are the ramifications now when something like that happens and individual states are making laws regarding certain services? What happens when the FDA changes their rules about certain drugs, right? What happens if there's some sort of mandate?
Mm.
You see this throughout the financial and payments world where uh, we've got our concerns over here that are strictly payments, and then you've got other compliance needs that are happening in these verticals, and you got to kind of mesh those together and make sure that they're working appropriately for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. That's okay. So let's talk about. I'd love to talk to you all day, Brad. It's been great, but I think we have to sort of try and start bringing it to a conclusion now. So let's go bring it back to what the origin to our main topic then. I'd like to know, like, with what you've seen, what do you see being the kind of the emerging trends and the future in general with embedded finance and healthcare in particular?
Yeah, yeah. So and much of what I'm saying obviously is very U.S. centric since that's our market.
Yeah.
But I think that what you're seeing is you're seeing obviously changing regulations. That will always be a
Mm.
problem. That you have to be working with a partner that's
Mm.
they're flexible, is helping you monitor those changes and will help you deal with them. Inclusivity is more and more a trend that we're seeing, right? Like making sure that there are, that access is available to all consumers, regardless of, the method of payment, their ability to pay,
Mm.
creating, payment options that are more flexible and digestible, as we mentioned earlier. I think that you're seeing, that's exacerbated by other trends. For instance, in that consumer responsibility portion of healthcare payments is rising, right?
Mm.
Even though the government's trying to, depending on who ends up in office, is working on potentially on the other side of that. You're still seeing there are more elective procedures, right? There are more,
Mm.
healthcare is moving online. That's a big trend, right? So you got to be able to do that well and understand, the implications of doing something online versus doing something in person, right? On the pharmacy side of things, online
Mm.
for pharmacy is completely different than in person. Um, you've seen this recently, specifically again, staying with pharmacy, for instance, where a lot of the pharmaceutical manufacturers are now saying, "Hey, I've got these compounding pharmacies, I've got these other groups that are, doing my thing, and I don't want them taking the business of my business away from me." So they're going direct to consumer.
Mm.
So I think that all of those things are in play. We find those really interesting. The things that get us really excited are helping. It kind of goes back to that what I
Mm.
really excited about from the pay theory ethos, and that is like how do we make sure that access is maintained for everybody, and
Mm.
how do we improve the system for everybody? So that means for the healthcare provider, getting them paid,
Mm.
for the consumer or the receiver of the healthcare services, making it so that they can pay when, where, and how they want to pay, right? How they need to pay. And then for the SaaS platform, it's like, hey, you've got to enable those things. And for us, then, like, unabashed pitch for pay theory, helping the SaaS platform monetize that,
Mm. Mm.
helping them create a better platform to, you know, have a stickier relationship, a more rewarding relationship with those providers.
Thanks, Brad. That's great. So if people want to reach out to you, talk to you more about this subject, where should they go?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, paytheory.com.
Brilliant.
And you can hit me up at brad@paytheory.com. It's simple.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much, Brad.
Hey, Anthony, it was a pleasure. Enjoyed it. Yeah, talk all day.